In this video on coordinate geometry of the line, we're going to be looking at graphing lines. We'll be using the intercept method, and we use this particular method with lines that pass through the x and y axes. These lines are usually written either in the form ax plus by plus c equals 0 or y equals mx plus c. The intercept method operates on the basis that all points that are on the x-axis have a 0 in the y part of their point, and that all points that are on the y-axis have a 0 in the x part of their point. If you were paying close attention in the last video on graphing vertical and horizontal lines, you might recognise that y equals 0 is actually the equation of the x-axis, and x equals 0 is actually the equation of the y-axis. In any case, it's these two zeros that we're going to be using to work out our intercepts, to work out where the lines go through our x-axis and our y-axis. So here's our first example. We want to graph the line 3x plus 2y minus 6 equals 0. So to do this, we're going to figure out where this line goes through the x and y axes, and for that we have to do two separate calculations. So I'm going to make out a quick little t-table here for that calculation. I'm going to first of all figure out where the line crosses the x-axis, and I'll do that by letting y equals to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my equation, and wherever I see a y, I'm going to replace it with 0. So you'll see there that I've subbed 0 in for y and I've put brackets around it. So now I'm going to simplify this and solve for x, and that's quite straightforward. So I'm going to first of all just multiply out the brackets, but okay, well 2 by 0 is 0, so actually that's not worth anything. So what I can do to kind of speed up the process here is that I can just cross that bit of my equation out. So now I'm just left with 3x minus 6 equals 0, and that's pretty easy to solve for x. I'll just keep the x's on the left, the numbers on the right, which is 3x equals 6, and then I'll divide across by 3. So of course that's going to give me x equals 2. Now the whole idea here is that I want to get a point on the x-axis when I go to draw my graph. So the point that I'm going to make is going to have an x part and a y part. Well, here's the x bit, I just found it, and the y bit of the point is going to be the y that I used, the y equals 0. So I'm going to put that x and that y together to make that point 2, 0. And then I'm going to repeat the process, but this time for the y-axis, letting x equal 0. Okay, so if you feel confident about this, now pause the video and see if you can do that yourself and figure out what point this line goes through the y-axis at. Then play and see if you're correct. Okay, so this time I want to replace the x with 0. So there's my x, I'll put brackets there and put a 0 instead. And like before, what that really does is it just knocks the x bit out, because 3 zeros is nothing. So I can drop that effectively, and I'm left with 2y minus 6 equals 0. So if you didn't pause before, do it now and solve out for y. Okay, so now I want to get the y on the left and the number on the right. So I'm going to say 2y equals to 6, and then I'm going to bring the 2 across and divide. And so this time I'm getting y equals to 3. Okay, so now again I want to make a point. So of course my point is going to be an x and a y together. So I'm going to have my y here, and my x is the x that I subbed in. Don't forget, the x always goes first in a point. So my point this time is the point 0, 3. Now that I have my 2 points, one on my x-axis and one on my y-axis, I can draw my graph. Take a moment so to draw an xy plane yourself, and then we'll draw our line in. So I've got my xy plane drawn, I've got my 2 points, I need to mark them in. So on the x-axis, first of all, I'm going to mark in the point 2, 0. So there it is. And I'm going to mark in the point 0, 3 on the y-axis. So there's that point. And then to finish up, all I have to do is just join those 2 points together. And there's the graph of my line. So now here's a little bonus question. We want to find the area of the triangle enclosed by the line 3x plus 2y minus 6 equals 0, the x-axis and the y-axis. When we say that we've got a triangle enclosed by those three things, what we mean is that they make the lines of the triangle. So 3x plus 2y minus 6 is this line, and the x-axis is this line, and the y-axis is here. So what we've got there is this little triangle. So how can we find its area? Well, you probably remember the formula for the area of a triangle, but just in case you don't, I'll remind you. And the formula is that the area of a triangle is half the base times the perpendicular height. And we can quite easily see what the base measurement and height measurements are in this case. We can see that the base is 2 boxes across, so from 0 to 2, so that's got a length of 2. And we can see that the height is 3 boxes up from 0 to 3, so we've got a height of 3. So we can quite easily fill those values then into our calculation for area to find the area of that triangle. Pause the video for a second, give this a go, and then play to see if you're correct. Okay, so the area in this case is going to be 1/2 times 2 times 3. And then I can simply work this out mentally or on the calculator. And my answer is that I get an area of 6 units square. Okay, so now a question for you. So I want you to graph the line 2x minus 3y minus 12 equals 0. Pause the video here while you do this. Don't forget there's a couple of steps. Make your t-table, find your points, draw your graph, mark in your points and join them. And then when you've that done, play to see if you're correct. Okay, so I'm going to start with the x-axis, which means I'm using y equals 0. So I'm going to my equation, and where I see the y, I'm replacing it with 0 in a bracket. So there I go. And then, of course, the 3 by 0 is just going to go to 0. So I effectively have to knock that out completely, leaving me with just 2x minus 12 equals 0. I'll bring the 12 across, and I'll divide by 2. So that gives me x equals 6, and then I'll make my point, which is 6, 0. So don't forget again, that's got by putting the x and the y together to make the point. The x always goes first. Next, I'm looking at the y-axis. So I'm letting x equals 0. So same idea again, it's just this time I'm replacing the x with 0. Again, I can just knock that term out, leaving minus 3y minus 12 equals 0. And then I'll bring the 12 across, and I'll divide by minus 3. So this time, I'm getting a y value of minus 4. And then I'll make my point. So don't forget again, that's the x and the y together. So my x was 0 and my y is minus 4. So the point is 0 minus 4. And now I need to go and draw my xy plane. And before I do that, it's probably quite a good plan to have a look at the numbers that I've gotten in my solutions to let me know how far I need to go in each direction. So for example, with the x-axis, I had to go out as far as 6. And with the y-axis, I have to go as far as minus 4. And it's better to check that before you begin to draw in case you end up running out of space by accident otherwise. So I've definitely gone far enough in each direction, and I've even given myself an extra little bit of space beyond that. And now I'll mark my points in. So on the x-axis, I've got that 6, 0, and on the y-axis, I've got that 0 minus 4. And I'll draw the line by connecting those together. Do be nice and careful as you draw that. Make sure that you go right through the middle of the point. Don't have it slightly off to the side. So take a moment to line your ruler up carefully before you draw the line. So my line is drawn, and now bonus question. Find the area of the triangle enclosed by 2x minus 3y minus 12 equals 0, the x-axis and the y-axis. Pause the video here now while you do that yourself, and then play to see if you're correct. So there's my triangle highlighted. It's enclosed by the line that we just drew, the x-axis and the y-axis. They form the sides of the triangle. The area is 1/2 the base times the perpendicular height. So in this case, that's 1/2 by 6, which is the base, and 4, which is the height, giving an area of 12 units squared. Just to note something of interest here, that even though we're counting down into the negatives here on the y-axis, if I look at the actual length of the side of the triangle, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes. So it's still 4 boxes down. And that's why I'm giving 4 here as my measurement for height. So measurements of distance or length of sides will always be positive values. Let's look at a second example now. We're going to stick with the same method, but this time we're going to do it for lines in the form y equals mx plus c. So I'm going to graph y equals 4x plus 8, and I'll do it using this intercept method. If you feel confident about how to proceed, pause the video here and try it yourself. Otherwise, follow along with me. I'm going to start off by making my little t-table for my calculations, and I'll start with the x-axis. So I'm going to let y equals to 0. So I'm going to go to my equation, and where I've got y, I'm going to replace it with 0. No need for a bracket this time because the y doesn't have a coefficient. And now I want to get the x by itself. I'm going to bring the 8 across the equal sign to make it minus 8, and then I'll divide by 4 to get the x. So in this case, that's going to come out as minus 2. And then I'll use that information to make the point. So again, the x and the y together make the point. This time that's the point, oh, that should be minus 2, shouldn't it? Minus 2, 0. And now I'll go to the y-axis, where I'll let x equals to 0. And if you're quick off the mark, you'll notice that because the line is written in the form y equals mx plus c, I actually know the y-intercept pretty much from the get-go. But let's go through the process just to confirm that we're correct. So I'll replace my x with a 0. And just like in the previous examples, the 4 by 0 is just going to turn into nothing. So I can effectively just cross it out, and I get y equals to 8. And we're not surprised about that because, like I mentioned a moment ago, that piece of information kind of jumps out of the equation at the line with us. That number at the end, when we're written in the form y equals mx plus c, of course, is going to be that y-intercept value. So I've got my x and my y now. I'll make my point again. And now I have all the information that I need to draw my graph. So pause the video here while you do that, and then play to see if you're correct. And now that I have my xy plane, in I go with my points. So the point -2, 0 is going to be located here. And the point 0, 8 on the y-axis is going to be located here. And then I'll simply join them together to get my line. And you've guessed it, bonus question. Find the area of that triangle enclosed by y equals 4x plus 8, the x-axis and the y-axis. Pause the video while you do this and then play to see if you're right. So I've highlighted the triangle that has the line, the x-axis and the y-axis as its sides. And now I'll make a note of the formula. Half the base times the perpendicular height. So now what are the base and the height? Well, the base is 2 spaces across, so the base is 2 and the height is 8. And again, notice that even though I'm going off into the negative side of my x-axis, I still give a positive value for that distance. So I'll calculate as a half times 2 times 8. My answer is 8 units square. Okay, so to finish up then a question for you. Graph the line y equals -2x minus 6 using this intercept method. Pause the video while you do this and then play to see if you're correct. Okay, so I've got my table set up and ready to go. We'll start off with the x-axis by letting y equal to 0. So we'll have 0 equals -2x minus 6. And then I'll bring my x's to one side and my numbers to the other. So this time I'm bringing the x across, giving me 2x equals -6. And then I'll divide across by 2. And I'll get x equals -3. And then of course I'll put my x and my y together to make a point. So that point is a point -3, 0. And now onto the y-axis. And of course for the y-axis I've got x equals 0. So I'm going to my equation and replacing that x with a 0 in brackets. And like we saw before, this one goes really smoothly for us. There's hardly any effort because I can just knock out that term straight away, getting my answer y equals -6. And again, we can actually spot that from our original equation here because of the format that it's laid out in. Because it's in the format y equals mx plus c, the number at the end is the y-intercept. So we almost have our answer without any effort. And again, then I have to make my point. So again, the x and the y will go together. So 0 and -6, giving me the point 0, -6. And then I'm going to go off and draw my xy plane. Again, don't forget, have a glance at your numbers here to help you decide how far to go in each direction before you begin to graph. Plot in your points and join them up to make your line. So I have my plane drawn. I have my values marked in. I'll mark my points now. So for the x-axis, I'm going for -3, 0. So that point is located right there. And on the y-axis, I'm going for the point 0, -6. So down I go to 0, -6. And I mark that in there and I just join them together. And there I have my line. And yes, you guessed it, bonus question. Find the area of the triangle enclosed by the line y equals -2x minus 6, the x-axis and the y-axis. So pause here, give that a bash, and then play to see if you're correct. So as always, make a note of your formula first of all. So again, it's half the base times the perpendicular height. Figure out where your triangle is. And there it is with our line as one side and the x-axis as another and the y-axis as another. Identify your measurements. And the sides are 3 and 6 this time. So fill those into your calculation. And this time our answer is 9 units square.